I couldn't scream. I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't even turn my head away from the sound of his voice. But I heard everything. The last thing I remember before the accident was the smell of rain on concrete and the sound of my own laugh. My coworker Dana had just told the worst joke of her life in the parking garage, something about a dentist and a parrot, and I was still laughing when I stepped off the curb. I didn't see the car. I didn't hear it coming. 1 second I was laughing, and the next second there was nothing. Then there was sound again, beeping, slow, steady, mechanical. A hum of something electrical nearby. The faint antiseptic bite in the air that I would later learn to associate with ICU rooms, and voices muffled at first, like someone had wrapped the whole world in cotton. Then, gradually, clearer. I didn't know how long I'd been there when I first heard my husband's voice. I didn't know it was the 3rd day. I didn't know yet that the doctors had told him there was a 50-50 chance I wouldn't wake up. I only knew the sound of him, that low, impatient exhale he always made when something inconvenienced him. I'd spent 11 years learning the language of that exhale. "Any change?" he asked someone. A voice I didn't recognize, a nurse, maybe said something soft and clinical. "Right," my husband said. And then I heard him pull the chair closer to my bed and sit down. The chair legs scraped the floor the way they always scraped the kitchen floor at home when he didn't want to bother lifting them. That sound was so ordinary, so familiar. For one moment, I felt something like relief. That feeling didn't last long. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. I was a licensed physical therapist working at a rehabilitation center in Columbus, Ohio. I had a caseload I loved, a small house with a porch I was slowly repainting, and a marriage that I had spent the better part of 2 years telling myself was fine. My husband's name is Well. I'll call him what I called him in my head during those long, dark, beeping days. I'll call him my husband, because that's what he was. That's the part that still makes my chest tighten when I think about it. We'd met in our early 20s, gotten married at 25, and somewhere between year 3 and year 8, he had quietly decided that I was not the version of success he had imagined for himself. He never said that out loud. He said other things instead. He said I was too focused on work, that I was emotionally unavailable, that I didn't push myself. He said these things in couples therapy, calmly, while the therapist nodded, and I sat there trying to figure out where I'd gone wrong. I didn't know then that he had already started building a different life on the side. I would learn that later. In the hospital, from his own mouth, while he thought I was somewhere unreachable. I don't know exactly what day it was when he first said something he couldn't take back. Time in that room had no shape. There was only light and dark behind my eyelids, and sound, and the slow weight of my own body that I could not make move, no matter how hard I tried. He was on the phone. I heard him pacing 2 steps, turn, 2 steps. Turn the way he always paced in our kitchen when he thought he was handling something privately. "I know," he said. "I know it's complicated." A pause. "She's not waking up anytime soon," the doctor said. Another pause. "No. Listen to me, I told you. Once things are settled, we figure out the rest. I just need you to be patient." I told myself I was misunderstanding, that it was a work call, that the word patient had nothing to do with me lying in that bed. I was very good at telling myself things like that. I'd had practice, but then, 2 days later, or maybe it was 3, I couldn't be sure he came back and sat down next to me, and this time, he didn't make a call. He just sat there for a long moment. I could hear him breathing, and then he leaned close enough that I could feel the warmth of him near my face. And he said, quietly, the way you say something when you're finally alone and you don't have to perform anymore. "You know what's funny? I actually thought this was going to be harder." I waited. My heart monitor didn't change. Somewhere in the room a machine beeped its steady, indifferent rhythm. "I kept thinking I'd feel something," he continued. "Guilt, maybe. Or at least I don't know. Something. But honestly, Claire, it's mostly just logistics at this point. Logistics. I was lying in a hospital bed, unable to move my fingers, and I was a logistics problem. The house is in both our names, so that's annoying, he said, almost to himself. But Renata's brother is a real estate attorney, so… He exhaled. That same exhale. It'll work out. Renata. That was a name I hadn't heard before. A new word in a language I was suddenly fluent in. I want to tell you that I felt rage in that moment. That something inside me ignited and burned. But the truth is, what I felt first was something quieter and colder than rage. It was recognition. The specific, hollow recognition of someone who has just been handed proof of something they already knew, deep down, but had been too afraid to look at directly. I had known, somewhere under all the justifications and the therapy sessions and the late nights, convincing myself that a hard marriage wasn't the same as a broken one I had known. And now I couldn't even cry about it. The nurses talked to me. Not all of them, but a few. There was one whose footsteps I came to recognize lighter than the others, quick but not rushed. She'd come in during what I started to think of as the early hours, when the room was quieter, and she'd check my monitors, and sometimes she'd say things, small things. Your sister called again today. The hydrangeas by the window are from your coworkers. They smell nice, actually. My shift's almost over, but I'll be back tomorrow. She didn't know if I could hear her. I think she talked to me anyway, because she was the kind of person who believed it mattered, even if no one could confirm it. I held on to her voice like a rope, but it was someone else who actually changed everything. I heard her before I understood who she was. Small footsteps, uneven, the gait of a child who was either very young or very tired. And then a little voice, uncertain, right at the edge of my bed. "Hi," she said. "I'm in the room next door." The nurses said it was okay if I visited for a minute. She went quiet for a moment, as if she was waiting to see if I'd respond. I couldn't. I was screaming at my own hands and they weren't listening. "I'm 9, she said. "My name's Lily. I have leukemia. I've been here for a while." She said it plainly, the way children say true things, without the careful softening that adults layer around hard words. "You look peaceful, at least. My mom says people in comas are just taking a very long rest." She came back the next day. And the day after that, she told me about the shows she was watching on her tablet. She told me about her teacher, who had apparently sent the whole class's drawings to the hospital in a construction paper book. She told me that she was scared sometimes at night, but that she'd figured out if she counted backwards from 300, it helped her fall asleep. I started counting with her, silently, in the dark behind my eyes. She was 9 years old and she had leukemia, and she was the bravest person in that hospital. Maybe the bravest person I'd ever encountered. And she had chosen, for reasons that were entirely her own, to spend some of her small daily allotment of energy sitting next to a stranger who couldn't answer her. I didn't know it then, but she was going to be the reason I fought my way back. My husband's visits became less frequent. I tracked them by sound, the particular way the door opened when it was him, the smell of his jacket, the rhythm of his impatient pacing. He came every few days. He sat for shorter and shorter periods. Once he was on the phone the entire time and left without saying anything to me at all. One afternoon he came in while Lily was there. I heard him stop in the doorway. "Oh," he said. "Sorry, who are you?" "I'm Lily," she said, unrattled. "I visit Claire." A pause. "Right," my husband said. He waited, clearly hoping she'd leave. She didn't. She kept talking to me, telling me about some nature documentary she'd been watching about deep ocean fish that make their own light. "That's kind of like you," she told me. "My mom says when everything is dark, some people just glow on their own." My husband made a small sound, dismissive, almost amused, and left the room. I wanted to gather that sentence up and keep it somewhere safe. When everything is dark, some people just glow on their own. That night, for the first time since the accident, I felt something move. Not my fingers, not yet, but something underneath everything, some core part of me that my husband's voice had been slowly, steadily packing down for years. It shifted, like a door opening inward. I am not logistics, I thought. Clear and simple and solid, the way thoughts sometimes are when there's nothing else to distract from them. I am not his problem to solve. I am not finished. I don't remember waking up the way you might expect. There was no dramatic moment, no gasp, no sudden flood of light. The doctors told me later it happened gradually over about 4 hours. My brain activity changed. My responses changed. And then at some point I simply surfaced, like coming up from very deep water, slow and disorienting. The first face I saw was the nurse with the light footsteps. She had red hair pulled back and tired eyes, and the most genuinely relieved expression I'd ever seen on a stranger. "There you are," she said. "Just that. There you are." I couldn't talk at first. My throat was raw, my voice barely a rasp. But I could nod. I could move my fingers. I could, when she asked me to, squeeze her hand. Each small thing felt enormous. Each small thing felt like proof. My husband came when they called him. He stood in the doorway of my room in a way that I now understood, that careful, managed expression, the performance of appropriate concern. I watched him from the bed, and I felt very calm. Calm the way you feel when a decision has already been made, and all that's left is the telling. "Claire," he said, coming toward me. "Thank God. This has been—" "I know," I said. My voice was rough and small, but it was mine. "I heard you." He stopped. I let the silence do the work it needed to do. "Everything," I added. "I won't tell you it was simple after that. It wasn't. Recovery from a traumatic brain injury is not a montage. It is slow and frustrating and sometimes humiliating. And it asks things of you that you don't always have. I relearned things. I had headaches that lasted for days. I went to my own physical therapy sessions and sat in the same chairs I used to help patients into. And I felt a strange, complicated gratitude for both the irony and the understanding it gave me. My husband moved out while I was still inpatient. We didn't have a dramatic confrontation. I had one conversation with an attorney, and then another attorney handled most of what followed. Renata, I learned, was a woman he'd been seeing for 16 months. The house sold 7 months after my discharge. I got half, which was exactly what I was entitled to, and I rented a small apartment on the east side of Columbus with a window in the kitchen that caught the morning light in a way I hadn't expected. But before all of that, while I was still in the hospital, still relearning how to make my body do what I asked the nurse with the red hair about Lily. She went very still for a moment. "You knew Lily?" she asked. I told her what I could in my scratchy half-voice. The footsteps, the deep-sea fish, the counting backwards from 300. The nurse pressed her lips together. "She's Lily, finished her last round of treatment last week. She went home." I cried then. Not from sadness, though it was mixed up in there too, but mostly from relief that came out of nowhere and wouldn't stop. That small, brave, glowing girl had gone home. 2 months after my own discharge, I sent a card to the pediatric ward with Lily's name on it. The ward secretary called me a week later. She said Lily's mother had read her the card. She said Lily wanted me to know she was doing okay and that she had started a new documentary about birds. I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen with the morning light coming through the window, and I felt something settle in my chest. Something that had been loose and grinding for a long time, finally finding the right place. I've thought a lot about what those days in that room gave me, which is a strange thing to think about, because they also took things. They took months of my life. They took my marriage, though I know now that was already gone long before the accident. They took a version of me who was very good at looking away from things she didn't want to see. But in exchange, I got something I'm not sure I would have found any other way. I got proof that I could be completely still, completely silent, completely stripped of every resource I usually relied on, and still be in there. Still be me. Still be someone a 9-year-old with leukemia would choose to talk to about fish that make their own light. That's not nothing. That is actually a lot. My husband thought he was talking to a problem that had conveniently stopped talking back. He didn't understand that silence isn't the same as absence. He didn't know that I was listening to every word, cataloging every sentence, and quietly, slowly, deciding who I was going to be when I got my voice back. I have my voice back now. I use it differently than I used to, more carefully, more deliberately. I use it to tell my patients things I wish someone had told me, that the body keeps track of what the mind tries to ignore, and that sometimes the hardest work isn't the physical therapy, it's letting yourself believe you deserve to get better. I use it to call my sister, who I'd let drift too far during the years when my husband made me feel like my family was something to be managed rather than loved. And sometimes, on ordinary evenings when there's nothing remarkable happening, and the light in my kitchen is doing that thing it does, I use it just to say out loud, to no one in particular, I'm still here, because I am. And I'm not the same woman who stepped off that curb laughing at a bad joke about a dentist and a parrot. I'm someone who went somewhere very dark and very quiet and found out what she was made of. Turns out, it was more than anyone including me had given me credit for. If you're in a season where you feel invisible, where the people closest to you have started treating you like a problem instead of a person, I want you to hear this. Being unseen is not the same as being gone. Sometimes the quiet is where you finally get to figure out who you actually are. Without anyone else's version of you drowning it out, you're still in there, and that matters more than they want you to know.